Imagine you are sitting in a meeting, right, and you suddenly realize that the game is completely rigged.
Oh, man. That is a terrible feeling.
It really is. Like, picture this. You've been working on a massive project for months. You've poured your weekends into it, literally bleeding over the spreadsheets, meticulously refining every detail until it's bulletproof.
You're fully invested.
Exactly. You finally present it to the executive board, and they love it. They're nodding, they're smiling, taking notes. And then your manager, who, let's be honest, barely even read your executive summary, smoothly leans into the microphone.
I can see where this is going.
Right? And they say, thank you. Yes, my team and I worked very hard to bring my vision to life.
Ugh. It's just a profoundly disorienting sensation.
It's infuriating.
It is, because, we are conditioned from a very young age to believe that meritocracy is like a physical law of the universe.
Right. Work hard, get an A.
Exactly. Do the work, get the grade, produce the value, get the reward. But then you graduate and you enter the adult world.
Welcome to reality.
Yeah, you walk into a corporate office or, a political arena, and the floor just drops out from under you. You realize there is this shadow architecture governing human behavior.
And the rule book they handed you in school,
Yeah.
it just doesn't apply to it at all.
Not even a little bit.
Well, that shadow architecture is exactly what we are tearing apart today on this deep dive. And we are looking at a really fascinating stack of materials.
It's quite a stack.
It is. And what's wild is how they initially seem like they belong on entirely different planets.
Yeah.
We are pulling from Robert Greene's incredibly cynical historical playbook, the 48 Laws of Power.
A classic.
Yeah. But we are pairing that gritty realism with a deeply esoteric text on chaos magic called Liber Null.
Which is quite the pivot.
Totally.
Yeah.
And then we're adding a declassified 1983 CIA report assessing the Monroe Institute's gateway process, plus some deep analyses of consciousness and reality creation for the Third Eye Drops and Aaron Doughty channels.
I mean, on the surface, placing a Machiavellian corporate strategy guide next to, like, a declassified CIA document about out-of-body experiences, it just seems absurd.
It sounds crazy.
It does, but the through line is actually stunningly cohesive, because all these texts, they're attempting to decode the exact same thing.
Human compliance and human liberation.
Precisely.
So the mission of this deep dive is to explain exactly how hierarchy influences human behavior, like how we are unconsciously manipulated by social rank.
And most importantly, how you can use both ancient strategies and modern scientific consciousness exploration to basically build absolute immunity against these hidden power dynamics.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start in the mud.
Get our hands dirty.
We are starting in the gritty, manipulative, sometimes really ugly reality of the physical world. Office politics, historical betrayals, all of that.
Before taking a massive, scientifically backed leap into the quantum realm.
Yes. To show how breaking social rules is actually tied to breaking the rules of space and time.
What's fascinating here is the biological root of the problem. Humans are fundamentally wired to seek patterns and hierarchies for safety.
It's just baked into us.
It really is. If you look at our evolutionary history, knowing your exact place in the tribe, that kept you alive.
You needed the group to survive.
Right. The group provided resources, warmth, protection from predators. If you challenged the hierarchy and got cast out, you died.
Simple as that.
So we have this biological mandate to understand and comply with social rank, but that very wiring makes us incredibly susceptible to being controlled.
We just hand over the reins.
We do. We willingly walk into invisible cages because our primitive brains think the cage is a shelter.
Wow. Okay, let's look at the bars of that cage, starting with the ego of the people running the hierarchy. Green's Law 1 is never outshine the master.
Right.
So going back to that office meeting example, let's say you handle that stolen credit gracefully. You don't make a scene.
You take the high road.
Yeah. You keep doing a great job, hoping your undeniable talent will eventually, force a promotion. But instead, your boss suddenly starts micromanaging you.
Typical.
They start picking apart your emails. They leave you off important calendar invites. You did excellent work, but you're being actively punished.
Which feels completely irrational.
Totally irrational.
Oh.
But it's actually a predictable defense mechanism, isn't it?
Completely predictable. You stepped on their ego, you shined a little too brightly, and suddenly their position felt fragile.
So they lash out.
Yeah. Insecurity in a position of power is a highly, highly dangerous force, because power dynamics shift how people perceive reality and personal accountability.
How so?
Well, when someone is above you in social rank, their primary concern often shifts from, the success of the organization to the preservation of their own status.
That makes total sense. And the sources bring up a historical anchor for this that is just brutal. Nicolas Fouquet.
Oh, yes. The tragic story of Fouquet.
He was the finance minister for King Louis XIV of France in the 1600s.
Yeah.
And from the sounds of it, Fouquet was brilliant, he was wealthy, highly ambitious, and he made a catastrophic miscalculation.
A literal life-ending one. Because he fundamentally misunderstood the psychological fragility of his boss.
Right.
Fouquet wanted to be prime minister. So to prove his competence, his refined taste, and his overall value to the crown, he decided to throw this lavish, unimaginably extravagant party.
At his newly built chateau, right, Vaux-le-Vicomte.
Exactly, to honor the young king. And we are talking about the most magnificent gardens in Europe, fine art, a custom play written by Molière, a massive fireworks display.
So in his mind, he thought he was proving his worth. He was basically handing in the ultimate portfolio saying, look at what an incredible asset I am to your kingdom.
And that was his fatal error.
Why?
Because Louis XIV was styling himself as the Sun King. He demanded to be the absolute center of gravity, the brightest, most awe-inspiring light in any room.
Oh, I see.
So when the king arrived and saw Fouquet's chateau, he didn't feel admiration for his minister's talent. He felt eclipsed.
The boss felt outshined.
Exactly. The sheer splendor of Fouquet's creation made the king's own palaces look kind of lacking. The king felt small.
And when a king feels small, people disappear.
They really do. Days later, Fouquet was arrested by the captain of the king's musketeers. They fabricated all these charges of embezzlement.
Just totally made up.
Mostly, yeah. And Fouquet spent the rest of his life decades in solitary confinement.
Decades. Life in prison because he threw a really good party.
Because social rank dictates compliance through the fragile ego of the superior. When a master feels overshadowed, their instinct isn't to applaud your talent.
It's to eliminate the threat.
Exactly. Fouquet thought his brilliance was his shield, but in a rigid hierarchy, your talent is a weapon pointed directly at your own head if you don't actively control how it reflects on the person above you.
Wow. Which brings up a really insidious aspect of this. It's one thing to get punished for being too good, right? But we're also manipulated into complying with the hierarchy without even realizing we're being controlled.
That's the real trick.
Yeah, this is Law 31, control the options. The phrasing in the source material is about getting others to play with the cards you deal.
Right.
I'm thinking of this like a rigged casino. The house always wins because they printed the deck. But how does this actually play out in a modern environment? I mean, if a manager wants me to do something, why not just order me to do it?
Because direct orders breed resentment. Humans have an innate psychological reactance. When we feel our autonomy is being threatened, we push back, even if the order makes logical sense.
You just don't like being told what to do.
Exactly. A clever manager or a skilled politician understands that forcing compliance is incredibly inefficient. It burns political capital. Instead, they present you with the illusion of choice.
So they give you options, but the options are actually a trap.
They engineer the parameters of the decision. Let's say a manager needs a budget slashed by 20%.
Okay.
Instead of saying, cut your budget by 20% by Friday, which will absolutely cause a mutiny, they call a collaborative meeting.
Oh, a synergy meeting.
Exactly. And they present 3 plausible routes. They say, team, we have a challenge. We can take route A, which requires laying off 3 people.
Ouch.
We can take route B, which requires canceling our flagship marketing campaign.
Also terrible.
Or we can take route C, where everyone takes a temporary 20% budget reduction across the board to save jobs and keep the campaign alive.
Oh, wow. Route C is the only one that doesn't feel like a complete disaster.
Right. But route C is exactly what the manager needed to achieve from the start.
That is so manipulative. But you're right, the listener in that meeting feels empowered because they got to debate and choose route C.
The illusion of control minimizes resistance. You feel like a participant rather than a subject.
That's brilliant, honestly.
Henry Kissinger was famous for this in diplomacy. He would frame a complex geopolitical negotiations so that no matter which option the rival nation picked, it inherently advanced American interests.
Just stacking the deck.
Or, to use a classic business example, Henry Ford famously said customers could have the Model T in any color so long as it's black.
Right.
It standardizes his factory production while framing the limitation as like a distinctive feature of the brand.
And the psychological hook there is that the moment you pick an option, you defend it. Even if the menu was written by someone else, you will fight for the meal you chose because you tied your own agency to it.
You've taken ownership of the trap.
which loops right back to our opening hook about taking the credit. Law 7. Get others to do the work, but take the credit. This happens constantly, and it's deeply tied to how history remembers success.
It is. The sources highlight a classic rivalry to illustrate this: Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison.
Oh, this is a great example.
If we look at raw scientific brilliance, Tesla was arguably the superior visionary. I mean, he conceptualized alternating current. He wanted to provide wireless-free energy.
He was a genius.
But Tesla worked largely in isolation, and he was notoriously terrible at navigating the social and financial games of power.
He just wanted to do the work. He was in his lab tinkering.
And that is a noble but often politically fatal mindset. Edison, on the other hand, understood leverage.
He was a businessman.
Completely. Edison built a massive laboratory at Menlo Park. He hired dozens of brilliant engineers, mechanics, and physicists to do the grueling, tedious trial-and-error work of invention.
But Edison was the one who patented the results.
Edison publicized the findings. Edison branded the creation with his name.
So Edison didn't just invent the light bulb or the phonograph. He invented the mythology of Thomas Edison.
Precisely. He built an empire on the invisible labor of other people.
Because history remembers names, not hands.
The broader world doesn't have the time or interest to peer into the workshop and count the beads of sweat on the foreheads of the engineers. It looks at the name on the building.
That's a harsh reality.
In any hierarchy, effort is merely a tool, but visibility is the actual prize. The powerful understand that delegating the grind while reserving the glory is how you scale influence.
So if you are listening to this and you're a beginner at spotting these power plays, recognizing this dynamic is your first crucial step.
Absolutely.
Like if your manager constantly presents your team's grueling late-night sprints as their own strategic vision, you have to realize that working harder isn't going to save you.
Putting in more hours won't earn you the promotion because you are just pouring fuel into someone else's engine.
Right. You have to start managing your visibility.
And as you start learning to outmaneuver that hierarchy, you have to look out for the darkest application of this principle.
Oh, it gets darker.
Oh, yeah. The people at the top are not just using systems to hoard the credit. They're using systems to entirely insulate themselves from the negative consequences of their own actions.
Okay, let's get into that. We're moving into Act 2, Corporate Jujitsu. Surviving the office without losing your soul.
A vital skill.
Law 26 is keep your hands clean. So if the powerful hoard the credit, this law is about how they shift the blame downward. They use power dynamics to completely avoid personal accountability for the ugly, unpopular necessities of leadership.
The historical anchor the sources provide here is chilling, but it perfectly maps to modern corporate behavior.
Tell us about Cesare Borgia.
Right. Cesare Borgia, during the Italian Renaissance, conquered the Romagna region.
Okay.
It was a chaotic, rebellious territory plagued by feuding lords. It needed to be brought to heel, but Borgia was smart. He knew that if he personally enacted the brutal measures required to establish order, the people would forever despise him.
So he needs a scapegoat who is actually competent.
Exactly. He appoints a lieutenant named Ramiro de Lorqua. Ramiro is cruel, highly efficient, and absolutely loyal.
A dangerous combination.
Borgia gives him absolute power to pacify the region by whatever means necessary.
And Ramiro does exactly that. He uses terror, executions, whatever it takes, and he establishes order. But now the region is absolutely terrified of Ramiro.
Exactly. So once the region is subdued and peaceful, Borgia sweeps into town. He acts publicly horrified by the cruelty of his own lieutenant.
Even though he ordered it.
Right. He claims Ramiro acted out of line. And to prove his benevolence to the people, Borgia has Ramiro publicly executed.
Oh my God.
He literally had him split in two and left in the town square with a bloody knife beside him.
That is insane.
Borgia reaps the full benefit of the brutal pacification, but emerges in the eyes of the people as a merciful savior who delivered them from a tyrant.
That is incredibly dark. I mean, splitting a guy in half is extreme. But if we map the psychology of that onto a modern setting, it is happening in boardrooms right now.
It happens every day.
Think about it. A CEO decides they need to cut operational costs by 15% to boost the stock price before the quarterly earnings call. But they want to maintain their aura of benevolence. They want to be the visionary leader, the cool boss.
So they don't do the firing themselves?
Never. They bring in a ruthless external consulting firm to recommend the cuts, or they mandate human resources to enforce a massive, highly unpopular return-to-office policy designed specifically to trigger natural attrition.
Or they use middle management as the buffer.
Exactly. The middle manager has to pull their team members into Zoom calls, deliver the terrible news, enforce the budget cuts, and take the emotional brunt of the team's anger and tears.
The middle manager is the modern-day Ramiro de Lorqua.
Just getting split in half, metaphorically. Meanwhile, the CEO sends out a polished, company-wide email expressing, deep personal sorrow about the macroeconomic headwinds forcing these tough choices.
The hands that steer the power remain impeccably clean because the filth has been outsourced.
It's just wild. So how do you fight back against a system designed to use you as a shield, a scapegoat, or a battery? Our instinct, especially in model culture, is to rebel, right?
Sure, to speak truth to power.
To shout your truth, to dress differently, to loudly reject the corporate culture. But Green's Law 38 says that is a terrible idea. Think as you like, but behave like others. Why shouldn't I bring my authentic self to work if the work environment is toxic?
Because flaunting difference triggers the immune system of a group hierarchy.
The immune system.
Think about it biologically. A social group fundamentally finds safety in homogeneity. Shared values, shared dress codes, shared jargon, these signal that you are part of the in-group.
Right, you're safe.
When you walk in and loudly reject their customs, they don't view you as a courageous free thinker. The biological wiring of the group views you as a pathogen.
Oh, wow.
And a biological immune system's only instinct when encountering a pathogen is to isolate and expel it.
The sources bring up Galileo Galilei here, which is a fascinating pivot.
Galileo is the perfect example of surviving an oppressive hierarchy. He discovered, through empirical observation, that the Earth revolves around the sun.
Which was a big problem at the
A
time.
massive problem. The Catholic Church, which held absolute institutional and physical power, considered this heliocentric model pure heresy. It contradicted their doctrine.
Right.
When the Inquisition pressured him, Galileo didn't choose to be a fiery martyr. He publicly recanted his views. He kneeled and claimed the Earth was the center of the universe.
So he conformed outwardly to save his life.
Exactly. But his ideas were already published. His mathematics were sound. He survived to continue his work in private house arrest.
He outwardly respected the ritual of the powerful, but he preserved his inner intellectual freedom.
And his ideas lived on and eventually dismantled the church's scientific authority.
So for the listener, the actual advice here is about tactical camouflage. You wear the suit, or the tech bro fleece vest, or whatever the unwritten uniform of your industry is.
You nod during the synergy meetings.
Yes. You use their buzzwords. This isn't cowardice, and you aren't selling out. It is camouflage. You earn the access you need to do your real work, to collect the paycheck that funds your actual life, while preserving your inner freedom.
You don't waste your precious energy fighting HR over the dress code.
No. You preserve your energy for the battles that actually matter. Which brings us to the most counterintuitive strategy of all. Law 22, the surrender tactic.
This is a tough one for people to swallow.
Okay, I have to push back on this one. If the whole point of this deep dive is maintaining my autonomy and outmaneuvering my boss, why on earth would I surrender to them? Doesn't that just validate their power?
I get why it feels that way.
Like if my boss gives me a terrible directive and I just roll over and surrender, haven't I lost?
You've lost the immediate skirmish, yes, but you are preventing them from destroying you entirely. You have to understand that pride is the absolute enemy of strategy. When someone attacks you, your biological instinct is to fight back, to defend your territory, to prove your strength. But if your opponent is vastly stronger than you, or holds institutional power over you, like the ability to fire you on the spot, fighting back directly just guarantees your destruction. Surrender is psychological jujitsu.
I'm trying to picture how that works in practice. How does surrendering give me an advantage?
By yielding to a stronger opponent, you deny them the satisfaction of crushing you. An aggressor builds up adrenaline. They're expecting resistance.
They want to fight.
They want to fight to justify their display of dominance. When you suddenly comply completely and politely, their momentum carries them off balance. Their adrenaline has nowhere to go.
Oh, that makes sense.
They often become confused, complacent, or overconfident. The sources cite the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer here.
Right, the landlady dispute.
Exactly. Schopenhauer had this bitter, agonizing, years-long legal dispute with his landlady. It was draining his energy, his finances, and most importantly, his ability to work.
It was consuming his life.
Eventually, despite believing he was absolutely in the right, he simply surrendered and agreed to pay her a lifelong pension.
Wow.
To the outside world, it looked like a humiliating defeat, but to Schopenhauer, it bought him absolute peace of mind. He returned his focus entirely to his writing, which was his true purpose.
He bought his time back.
When she eventually died years later, he simply noted in his journal that the burden was gone. Yielding buys you the most valuable resource in any power struggle: time.
Time to rebuild your strength.
Time for the environment to change, time for the aggressor to make a fatal mistake.
I see. So it's about separating your ego from the immediate outcome. Surviving the hierarchy requires you to play a role, to be an actor on a stage.
Precisely.
But surviving the hierarchy is one thing. How do we actually build immunity to it? How do we get to a place where we stop caring so deeply about the corporate ladder or the social status in the first place?
Now we're getting to the really good stuff.
Yes, this is where we pivot sharply into Ag 3, Breaking the Matrix. And we are looking at Liber Null, which is a foundational text of chaos magic. It suggests that limiting behavior is defined as anything that narrows your options.
That is the core philosophy. If you want true freedom from these hierarchies, you have to step entirely outside your culture, your society, and crucially, your professional identity.
Step outside it completely.
The text argues that the comforting chains of our society, our job titles, our political affiliations, our social standing, they give us a sense of definition and belonging, but they also trap us.
They become the levers that manipulators use to control us.
Exactly.
The text introduces this concept of becoming omnivorous in your identity. What does that mean practically?
It means diversifying who you are. The text notes that ancient Sufi mystics were required to master multiple secular trades alongside their intense spiritual studies.
Oh, really? Like what?
They might be scholars, but they also learned weaving or pottery or carpentry. Think about the psychological brilliance of that. If you only know how to be a mid-level marketing executive, your entire survival, both physical and psychological, is tied to that one specific hierarchy.
Right.
Your boss has absolute terrifying power over you because losing that job destroys your entire identity.
You have nowhere else to go.
But if you can think, believe, or do half a dozen different things, if you are a marketer, but you are also a highly skilled carpenter, a performing musician, and you know how to code, you cannot be trapped by the threat of losing one specific social rank.
Because your identity is omnivorous. The loss of one avenue does not mean starvation.
You become uncancelable in your own mind.
Which leads to this deeply challenging concept in Liber Null called anathemism, or heresy and iconoclasm, the mandate to destroy the sacred.
This is perhaps the most powerful cognitive tool in the text.
It sounds aggressive.
It does, but anathemism is basically the practice of deliberately exploring alternative definitions and seeking out ideas that seem bizarre, contradictory, or deeply offensive to your own culture.
Why on earth would I want to seek out things that offend me?
Because by exposing yourself to radically different paradigms, you start to see the absurdity and the arbitrary nature of mainstream dogmas.
Oh, I get it now.
Whether that's the dogmas of consumer society, where we are conditioned to buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't even like.
So true.
Or corporate dogmas about hustle culture being a moral virtue. Liber Null states a profound rule. An idea cannot be said to be completely understood until you understand the exact conditions under which it is not true.
Oh, that is heavy.
Yeah.
Make sure I've got that.
Yeah.
It means you can't just blindly believe something. You have to be able to argue the exact opposite case just as well so you understand the boundaries of your own belief.
Precisely. And the moment you understand the conditions under which your own deeply held beliefs are arbitrary, you become utterly immune to people manipulating those beliefs.
Oh, this ties back to Green.
Yes. Think back to Green's Law 27. Play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following.
Manipulators use symbols, rituals, and the promise of a grand purpose to bind people to them.
But if you have already practiced anathemism, if you have already taken a sledgehammer to your own desperate need for external meaning and seen through the illusions of society's sacred cows, a manipulator has absolutely nothing to latch onto.
Your mind is too fluid to be captured. You can't be brainwashed if you've already washed your own brain.
That's a great way to put it.
And to ground this back in our physical reality, because we still have to eat and live, Liber Null emphasizes this concept of bioaestheticism, trusting the body over the culture.
Bioaestheticism is the ultimate grounding mechanism.
How does it work?
The text argues that the human body asks only for a few fundamental things: food, warmth, sex, and transcendence.
Transcendence.
Transcendence being the urge to become one with something greater. Whether you find that through deep love, creating art, scientific discovery, or spirituality. The text argues that the drive for corporate power, societal authority, and excessive wealth are just sick aberrations of these simple, trustworthy biological needs.
So when the CEO is obsessing over a 2% increase in market share, they are actually just acting out a warped, mutated version of the biological need for warmth and security.
Yes. When you ground yourself in the actual physical needs of your biology and the genuine needs of your spirit, the artificial desires created by corporate hierarchies lose their gravitational pull.
You realize you don't actually want the vice president title. You just want to feel secure and engaged.
And there are far healthier ways to achieve that.
Which brings us to the most mind-bending part of this deep dive. Act 4, the science of escaping.
This is where it gets wild.
It really does. We are jumping from a manual on occult cognitive rebellion straight into a declassified United States government document. We are looking at Wayne McDonnell's 1983 CIA assessment of the Monroe Institute's Gateway Process.
A fascinating document.
And I want to frame this for the listener. If Robert Greene teaches you how the matrix of human power works, this CIA document attempts to teach you the literal physics of how to transcend it.
It's a profound leap, but it is completely logically consistent with everything we've discussed so far.
All right.
The CIA, specifically Army intelligence, wanted to know if the Monroe Institute's audio techniques for altering consciousness and achieving out-of-body states were scientifically valid. They wanted to know if these states could be reliably induced and used for intelligence gathering.
So what did Commander McDonnell actually find?
What he produced is a dense, rigorous document that attempts to construct a scientifically valid model of the time-space dimension and how human consciousness interacts with it.
To understand how this works, McDonnell uses an incredible metaphor. He compares the human mind in its normal state to a lamp, and the mind under the gateway process to a laser.
Yes, the lamp versus laser analogy.
How exactly does that transition happen?
In our normal waking state, what neuroscientists call beta brainwave frequencies, the human mind acts like an ordinary lamp. Think about a light bulb in a living room.
Okay.
It expends energy in a diffuse, chaotic, incoherent way. It spreads light over a wide area, but with very limited depth or penetrating power. It's scattered.
Because we're thinking about a million things at once.
Exactly. Your brain is simultaneously processing the temperature of the room, thinking about an email you need to send, replaying an argument you had yesterday, and deciding what to eat for dinner.
Your energy is leaking everywhere. It's noise.
It is entirely noise. But under the discipline of the gateway process, the mind is trained to act like a laser. A laser is a disciplined stream of light. It projects energy with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude.
The waves of light are perfectly aligned.
The CIA report notes that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found on the surface of the sun.
Whoa!
The gateway process aims to bring the left and right hemispheres of the brain into synchronized coherence, essentially turning the mind from a scattered, low-energy lamp into a highly focused, high-energy laser.
And they do this using audio technology called HemiSync, which stands for Brain Hemisphere Synchronization. I want to really dig into the how here.
Sure.
How does putting on a pair of stereo headphones and listening to static turn your chaotic brain into a coherent laser?
It leverages a biological mechanism called the frequency following response, or FFR.
Okay.
If your brain hears a sound at a certain frequency, it naturally tries to mimic it by adjusting its own brainwave output to match. It's entrainment.
That makes sense.
But the problem is, the frequencies associated with deep sleep or profoundly altered states like theta or delta waves, which sit between 1 and 7 hertz, they are below the threshold of human hearing.
Oh.
You can't just play a 4 hertz sound out of a speaker and actually hear it.
So how do you get the brain to hear something it can't physically hear?
Robert Monroe, the founder of the Institute, used beat frequencies. He would play a specific tone in one ear and a slightly different tone in the other.
Okay, so if I play a 100 hertz tone in your left ear and a 104 hertz tone in your right ear.
Your brain cannot process the dissonance of those two closely matched tones separately. So instead of hearing two different sounds, your brain's neural pathways synthesize them. It hears the difference between them.
Which is 4 hertz.
Exactly. It creates a third phantom sound inside your head at exactly 4 hertz. And because of the frequency following response, your brain waves begin to entrain to that 4 hertz frequency.
Wow.
You are safely, artificially inducing an altered state of consciousness by tricking the brain into syncing its hemispheres to process the phantom beat.
The report compares this modern audio technology to ancient spiritual techniques, right?
It does. The report notes that studies at the Menninger Foundation showed that a Zen monk with 20 years of intense, isolated meditative training could consistently establish this kind of hemispheric synchronization at will.
So 20 years of practice.
That was the benchmark. But the CIA found that this hemisync audio technology could induce the exact same physiological state rapidly, in a matter of weeks or months, in ordinary intelligence officers.
It was a technological shortcut to states of consciousness that previously required decades of monastic discipline.
Yes.
But it's not just the brainwaves changing. The physical body goes through a wild transformation too. The report talks about the bifurcation echo. This concept completely blew my mind. Walk us through what is happening in the chest cavity during this process.
This relies heavily on the biomedical models of Itzhak Bentov.
Okay.
He was a brilliant inventor and polymath whose work heavily influenced the CIA report. To understand the bifurcation echo, you have to look at the mechanics of the heartbeat. When your heart beats, the left ventricle ejects blood into the aorta. The aorta balloons out with the pressure, sending a pulse down into your lower abdomen where the aorta forks, or bifurcates, to travel down into your legs.
Okay, following.
When that heavy pulse of blood hits that fork, part of the wave rebounds. It echoes and travels back up the aorta.
So you have waves of blood constantly crashing into each other inside your chest.
In a normal, waking, stressful state, yes. You have downward pulses crashing into upward echoes. It creates a messy interference pattern.
Okay.
But when you enter the profound state of physical quietude induced by hemisync, which is functionally identical to the deepest states of transcendental meditation, the force and volume of your heartbeat lessens significantly.
Because your body thinks it's asleep.
Exactly. And as the heartbeat softens, that bifurcation echo slowly fades away. What happens next is astonishing from a biomechanical perspective.
What happens?
The colliding waves disappear and they are replaced by a regular rhythmic sine wave pattern. The interference stops. Your entire circulatory system begins vibrating synchronously.
Your body stops being a pump and becomes an oscillator.
Precisely. This rhythmic sine wave travels up the aorta into the skull, and it literally vibrates the brain itself.
It moves the brain.
Yes. The physical brain moves up and down inside the fluid of the skull about 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters in a continuous rhythmic pattern. This micromotion transfers acoustic energy through the skull at a frequency of about 7 to 7.5 hertz.
And why is 7 to 7.5 hertz so critical?
Because that is the exact resonant frequency of the Earth's ionospheric cavity.
That is staggering. You are literally physically tuning the acoustic vibration of your biological body to match the electromagnetic frequency of the planet.
Yes, your body's energy field becomes homogeneous with its surrounding planetary environment. You create a powerful carrier wave.
Wow.
But Commander McDonald's report takes this physics lesson even further. To explain why this matters for out-of-body experiences, he has to address the nature of reality itself.
Oh boy, here we go.
We perceive matter as solid. A desk feels like wood. But quantum mechanics knows that atoms are mostly empty space, made up of oscillating energy grids.
Right.
The CIA report states flatly that solid matter, in the way we conceptualize it, does not exist.
So if there is no solid matter, what are we actually looking at? What is the desk?
The universe is a gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity, created by interacting energy fields in motion. Human consciousness is also a hologram. We perceive reality by projecting these external holographic images onto the electrostatic fields of our own minds.
So reality is projection.
The report argues that we read the energy passing through us by comparing it to the memory stored in our own hologram.
Meaning, reality isn't a movie playing on a screen that we are passively watching. We are the projector, the film, and the audience simultaneously.
Exactly. We are actively decoding the universe.
And if you use hemisync to change the frequency of your brain, from that chaotic lamp to that coherent laser, you can tune your receiver to decode different higher dimensional aspects of the universal hologram.
You can see past the physical illusion.
Which brings us perfectly to Act 5, the ultimate rebellion, out-of-body experiences and reality creation.
Which is exactly what Robert Monroe, the creator of this tech, was experiencing long before he understood the physics of it.
Yes. The Third Eye Drop source details Monroe's origin story, and it is so important because it grounds this in skepticism.
Right. He wasn't a guru.
Exactly. Monroe wasn't some mystic seeking spiritual enlightenment in a cave. He was a highly successful, wealthy, rational broadcasting executive in New York in the 1950s.
He was a man of the corporate hierarchy.
A total suit. And one night, he's lying in bed trying to sleep, and he feels this intense full-body vibration. Then he feels himself floating, bumping against what he thinks is the floor.
But it's not the floor.
He looks closer in the dim light and sees a chandelier. He realizes with horror that he's bumping against the ceiling.
Unbelievable.
He looks down, sees his wife in bed, sees a man slugging next to her, gets furiously jealous, and then realizes with absolute ontological shock that the man in bed is him.
It's a terrifying moment that shatters your entire conception of what you are.
He panics, moves back down through the air, pops back into his physical body, and wakes up in a cold sweat. But because he was an empiricist, an executive who understood data, he didn't run to an exorcist or a priest.
He started experimenting.
Yes, he systematically recorded hundreds of these out-of-body experiences, charting the territory, which eventually led to the creation of HemiSync and the Monroe Institute to help others replicate it safely.
And this data-driven approach is exactly why the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency cared enough to investigate it. We have to remember the geopolitical context here.
The Cold War.
Yes. In 1972, the DIA produced reports suggesting the Soviets were heavily investing in psychotronic research, developing psychic spies who could learn state secrets or even influence military leaders remotely.
Which sounds like sci-fi, but they took it seriously.
Very seriously. This paranoia birthed Project Stargate and the U.S. military's remote viewing programs. But when you read the 1983 Gateway Report, you realize McDonnell went way beyond just figuring out how to look at Soviet missile silos.
He went deep.
He was using military resources to try and understand the source of all consciousness.
So let's tie this massive cosmic journey back to the listener sitting in their cubicle.
Yeah.
How does floating out of your body actually help you deal with a toxic social hierarchy? How does a declassified CIA document connect back to your boss stealing your credit in a meeting?
It connects at the very root of human control. All human hierarchies, whether it's a corporate office, a social clique, or a totalitarian political regime, rely fundamentally on fear.
The fear of losing your job, mostly.
The fear of financial ruin, the fear of social exile, or the ultimate fear, physical death. They control your behavior by threatening your physical survival or your social ego.
Okay.
But an out-of-body experience proves to the individual, not as an intellectual theory, but as an undeniable experience, that they are vastly more than their physical body.
You know you survive without it, because you just looked at it sleeping in the bed while you were awake on the ceiling.
That is the paradigm shift. Once a person experientially knows they exist independently of space and time, the threats of a terrestrial hierarchy lose their absolute power.
That is so true.
The boss can fire your physical body, they can damage your terrestrial bank account, but they cannot touch your consciousness.
The illusion of their ultimate authority collapses.
You become incredibly difficult to manipulate because the primary levers of control, the fear of death and deprivation, no longer work on you.
That is the ultimate rebellion. You don't fight the matrix of the office politics, you just realize you aren't made of its code. And the Monroe Institute mapped this territory using what they call focus levels to help people navigate this expanded awareness.
Right.
The Third Eye Drop's host described his personal experience going through these guided audio levels. Focus 10 is the foundational state, mind awake, body asleep. Your physical body is profoundly, deeply relaxed, almost paralyzed, but your consciousness is sharp as a tack, fully alert.
From there, you move to Focus 12, which they call expanded awareness.
What does that feel like?
The host described feeling subtle energy fields, a distinct sensation of moving upward or outward, and a complete disconnection from physical sensory input. You are no longer processing reality through your eyes and ears.
And then they discuss Focus 15, the state of no time, the void, an ocean of dark, wavy energy where the past, present, and future coexist. The host of the video shared a deeply poignant philosophical reflection from his time in this state. He talked about the loneliness of God.
It's a beautiful and somewhat melancholic concept.
Let's expand on that.
The idea is that if God, or the absolute source, is total unity, if it's literally everything that exists, then by definition it is alone. There's nothing outside of it to interact with.
There's no other.
Exactly. And so we, as fractured, individual holographic manifestations, are a remedy for that cosmic loneliness.
We are the universe voluntarily fragmenting itself so it can experience relationship, surprise, and love.
We are the universe experiencing itself to cure its own isolation.
When you touch that level of unity, when you realize your boss is just another fractured piece of the same consciousness trying to find its way, the petty grievances of an office rival seem laughably microscopic.
You can't hate them. You can only observe them playing their role.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Act 6, Defeating the Pendulums. How do we take this massive, expansive quantum perspective and apply it to our Tuesday morning staff meeting? We bring in Aaron Doughty's discussion of reality transurfing, a concept created by Vadim Zeland.
Doughty talks constantly about pendulums.
Let's define this clearly for the listener. What exactly is a pendulum in the context of reality transurfing?
A pendulum is a thought form, or a collective ego structure. When a group of people think in the same direction, their thoughts combine to create an invisible but very real energetic structure, a pendulum.
Can you give an example?
It could be a corporate culture obsessing over quarterly growth, a political faction, a rabid sports fandom, or a massive social media outrage cycle.
Well, I see.
These pendulums are not conscious, but they have a primary directive: to sustain themselves and grow. And they do that by feeding on human emotional energy.
So they are essentially energetic parasites.
Yes. And they love conflict. They thrive on it. If you think back to Robert Greene's Rules of Manipulation Law 43, work on the hearts and minds of others, or Law 27, create a cult-like following. Manipulators are essentially acting as the physical avatars of pendulums.
They want you to invest your emotional energy, your anger, your fear, or your blind devotion into their structure so it grows stronger and they gain power over you.
Exactly.
So how do you defeat a pendulum? If my office is consumed by toxic gossip, backstabbing, and a paralyzing fear of layoffs, how do I not get sucked into that vortex? My instinct is to fight it, to argue with the gossip, to try and fix the culture.
And that is exactly what the pendulum wants you to do.
Really?
The secret of reality transurfing is that fighting a pendulum just feeds it energy. If you get furious and argue with everyone, your emotional output is still being consumed by the structure.
The pendulum doesn't care if your energy is positive or negative. It just wants your attention.
The way to defeat it is simply to observe it. Neutrality is absolute poison to a pendulum.
So you don't ignore it, because ignoring it takes effort. You just acknowledge it without attachment.
Exactly. You acknowledge the office drama, you see the manipulator making their move, but you don't attach your emotional identity to it. You don't give it your fear or your anger.
And when you do that, the pendulum starves. It loses its grip on you. You become energetically invisible to its pull.
It's like a matador dodging a bull instead of trying to wrestle it. The momentum carries the attacker right past you.
So let's leave the listener with actionable daily autonomy rituals to put all of this together. How do we build this immunity in our daily lives? Step 1, based on the sources, mind-heart coherence. Doughty talks about the power of meditating to align the brain and the heart.
This maps perfectly to the gateway process aiming for coherence. The heart has an electromagnetic field much stronger than the brain. When you use meditation or focused breathing to bring your brainwaves and your heart rate into a synchronized rhythm, you increase the intensity and coherence of your own energetic field.
You stop resonating with the toxic, low-frequency pendulums of fear and office politics, and you start pulling in different synchronicities. You literally change the radio station your body is broadcasting and receiving on.
Step 2, guarding your attention. We have to realize that our attention is our most valuable currency.
It really is.
You have to draw strict boundaries around doom scrolling, social media outrage, and engaging in toxic environments. This ties directly back to Greene's Law 10. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky.
Because if you are constantly staring at a pendulum of misery, whether it's the news or a complaining coworker, your frequency will naturally entrain to it through that frequency following response we talked about. Guarding your attention is guarding your reality.
And finally, step 3. Creating, not reacting. Most people live in an outside-in approach. They are constantly grasping for control over external events or merely reacting to the rigged options others present to them.
You have to shift to an inside-out approach. Doughty emphasizes embodying the feeling of the reality you want, like gratitude before it happens.
I want to break down the biology of why that works, because it's not just magical thinking. It involves the reticular activating system, or RAS.
Right, the filter in the brain.
The RAS is a bundle of nerves at our brainstem that acts as a filter. At any given second, your brain is bombarded with millions of bits of sensory data. You would go insane if you processed it all.
Too much noise.
So the RAS filters out what it deems unimportant and only lets in what matches your internal programming. If you program your RAS with fear and anxiety about your boss, it will filter your reality to only show you threats.
But if you actively program your reticular activating system through practices like gratitude or coherence meditation, you physically alter the biological filter of your brain.
It will suddenly start showing you opportunities, solutions, and step routes that were always there, but that you were previously totally blind to. You change the hologram by changing the lens.
So to summarize this massive arc we've been on today, we started in the mud. We looked at the cynical, highly manipulative rules of physical hierarchies, the fragile egos, the credit stealing, the brutal scapegoating.
But instead of just learning to play dirty game better than the boss, we took a leap.
We realized that our fundamental consciousness dictates the reality of those very hierarchies. We learned to use tactical camouflage to survive the day-to-day, to unhook our identity from our job titles, and to use the science of brainwave coherence to realize we are projecting the hologram to begin with.
Which leaves us with a final, profound question to mull over.
Looks that.
What if the 48 laws of power, all the manipulation, the fragile ego, the desperate clawing need for control, what if they only apply when you are trapped in the lamp state of consciousness?
Wow.
If you use mind-heart coherence to become the laser, you don't just survive the hierarchy. You realize the hierarchy was only ever a hologram. You aren't just outmaneuvering the master, you are realizing there is no master.
Next time your boss takes the credit for your work or tries to trap you in an illusion of choice, don't get angry. Realize they are just a person shouting at a movie screen, desperately trying to control the plot. You don't need to fight them for a better seat in the theater. You are learning how to walk out of the auditorium and up to the projection booth. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Tomorrow, watch the pendulum swing and practice just letting them pass you by.